Okay.
Clarify with regards to the original application. Since that time, AOPA, or the Alberta government, has increased the MDS for ILOs. So now we are now held to a new standard. And I really want to say this is not against the neighbors. This is just the only way for us to bring these concerns up is through this mechanism, as within the county bylaws there is no reciprocal match of a setback. We have to meet AOPA rules, but there's nothing coming back from residents building within our area. So this is the only mechanism I have, is to bring these concerns through this system. But I guess the way we're looking at this is, my concern is that a precedent is set going forward, as there are no bylaws within the municipality that would have that setback on the reciprocal side towards a feedlot. What we want to do is we're trying to ensure that we minimize nuisance going forward with all our neighbors. Obviously, the more neighbors we get around us, the higher potential for conflict. We do not want to have conflict. We're just trying to mitigate that. So that's all I have to say.
Just one thing, you should state your name
Oh,
for
I'm
the
sorry.
record.
Brian Thiessen with Nameka Farms.
Okay.
My apologies.
Okay,
Thank you.
no problem. Any other comments? I'll ask the question. Is it possible that we could have a bylaw limiting development or residence within the MDS of any intensive livestock operation, being that most of the parcels are AG right now?
I can't speak to, could we? I mean, we didn't draft that in, but I mean, potentially we could. I would think we'd have to have it reviewed by legal. I don't want to say for sure from a legal perspective, but I think we could draft it. It's not what we have currently.
I know.
Yeah. So I would, without having the legal knowledge to say yes,
Okay.
I don't know.
I'll ask Angie, do you have any thoughts? I mean, we heard it. I don't know what else we can do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just made a note of it, and I think the best way to address it would be when we do open up the MDP, we can put policy in the MDP stating that we want a significant setback area around each existing CFO and any new ones to ensure that country residential or new housing is not placed within that setback area to protect the operations of existing and future CFOs. I would, of course, check with Joanne, but off the top of my head, I think that's possibly the best approach, with which we could then pull down into the OEB.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any thoughts, Joanne?
And while Joanne's coming up, I'm now that I know that the landowner was there before the feedlot was put in there, I look at it a little differently, because it also, where the feedlot may be restricted growth because of development coming in, I agree with that, and I'd probably not vote for that. But when the development was there prior to that, they also have a right to expand what they're doing on theirs, and they were the first ones in the doors. So that doesn't bother me as much as it did. It's
okay. Any thoughts, John?
Thank you, Mr. Reeve. I agree with what Angie indicated. I think that the appropriate step would be for County Council to put that policy into the MDP and then put that into your development standards that are specific with respect to residential development within proximity to a CFO, either existing or new. I think that makes sense, and it also gives some flexibility as well, that setback in certain circumstances could be varied if it was appropriate. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be absolutely legal and a workable policy if that's the direction council wanted to go.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we've had some comments. What's our wishes? Amber?
Just two questions, well, a comment and a question. I like putting it into the MDP and then bringing it down into the land use bylaw. Can you just clarify how resale would work? Like with it being zoned ag and sharing the well and the septic, like we probably wouldn't consider a subdivision on a garden suite, correct? Because of those shared utilities.
I can't speak for council, what they would consider. However, usually when there's a subdivision, correct me if I'm wrong, planners, but you make them have their own individual well and septic, correct?
Through the chair, so within the land use bylaw, it currently does state that a garden suite can't have shared utilities being water and septic. Typically, if it is going in for a subdivision, we like to see it kept within its own property boundary so that septic and water is contained. It's also a consideration for Alberta Health Services. They do have concerns with communal wells, typically when they're when they're new. So in this case, if the septic especially, that's the biggest concern, I think. Having a communal, if it's existing communal, Alberta Health Services typically doesn't have concerns as long as they're being able to maintain the usage, but the septic for sure, we would want to see that contained within the property so that there aren't future issues with leakage into adjacent properties if a subdivision is to occur.
Okay. Yes, I'm looking for one.
I move that we go with option 1 to approve 2018-076 request for a garden suite.
The Appendix A. Okay, any questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you for your comments. Subdivision 3.1 file WCAR 10-022. Thank you.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
I have a subdivision application, WCAR 10-022, which proposes to subdivide one 39-acre parcel from the titled land. It's adjacent to Township Road 215 and approximately 9 kilometers southwest of Speargrass. The recommendation for this application to the Municipal Planning Commission is to choose option 2 to refuse the subdivision application with reasons given. I had staff hand out a map which was submitted by the applicant after the report was prepared and approved by planning staff. It's a tentative plan formally put together by an ALS showing the proposed parcel for this particular application. It's highlighted in yellow in the 40-acre section, and the remnant there has an existing dwelling. So some of the existing MPC members are familiar with this particular parcel. It's been on staff's desk for a number of years. So I'm going to provide a summary based off of what's happened over the years on this particular parcel and what's current to date and what's being presented to MPC today. So in November 2009, an application was submitted for a 39-acre parcel by the landowner. The intent of the application, as per the submitted application package on file, was for residential use and to provide access to the northwest quarter. The parcel would maintain its agricultural general designation due to its proposed size. The application requires a subdivision of 39 acres, and then in the event that MPC provides approval and eventually endorsement by the county, the land would have to be consolidated through a consolidation plan through land titles to merge the sections of the southwest and the northwest quarters included in the proposed. To point out where the dotted line is, that's the beginning of the northwest quarter, which then goes along the boundary of the Bow River. And then to the north there is the southwest quarter, which is a plan which was previously subdivided out in 2015. And it is part of the southwest quarter 28, 21, 26, so it would require consolidation. At this time, MPC is being asked to make a decision on the proposed subdivision, which incorporates part of the southwest and northwest quarter sections. The final configuration, as previously mentioned, would be required to submit a consolidation plan if it is fully endorsed and approved by the county. Given the MGA changes in regards to subdivision applications and what is deemed complete, it is critical that old files that do not meet current standards go through MPC if efforts to bring them to current standards are unsuccessful. When the application was submitted in November 2009, there were no records of a peer review form signed or submitted. The county is now incurring costs at this time for the peer review of documents associated with this application, and due to the age of the application and changes in process, the county has been unable to charge for these peer review costs. Prior to this application, there have been 2 previous subdivisions applications on the southwest quarter by the landowner. The first was for a 6-parcel country residential development. At the time, MPC requested an ASP to be prepared by the applicant for the development. An ACP, an area concept plan, was instead submitted, which was refused by MPC on the basis that the subdivision was premature and that an ASP should be adopted prior to subdivision application being made. The application was ultimately refused by MPC and the redesignation bylaw rescinded. Following the refusal, the applicant appealed the decision to the MGB in the spring of 2009. However, the MGB refused the appeal on the grounds that the application did not meet the requirements of the land use bylaw, policies of the municipal development plan, and that an ASP would be required prior to considering a subdivision proposal. After the MGB decision, the applicant proceeded to apply for another subdivision to subdivide 20 acres of the homestead out of the quarter, the homestead being the one that's currently existing in the planned area. The MPC heard the application and tabled it to have administration work with the applicant on redesignating the parcel to CR. In December 2009, the rezoning application was heard by council and refused, which resulted in the closing of the subdivision application. The current application before MPC today was submitted on November 2009 and put on hold in February 2010 in order for council to complete the development of the Regional Growth Management Strategy Plan. During this time, the applicant worked with the county to close the previously existing road allowance between the southwest and the northwest quarters, with plans to purchase and consolidate the road allowance. The applicant then requested staff in 2012 to bring the application to MPC for consideration. However, the purchase and consolidation had not been completed at this time. MPC deferred the application to finish the road closure process. On December 7th, 2015, the road closure and consolidation was completed. Since the application was deferred in 2012, staff have worked with the applicant to bring the application and requirements for the subdivision up to date after the finalization of the road closure. Since reconvening talks with the applicant following the purchase, staff have requested a number of items from the applicant to bring to MPC. These included a revised site assessment report, revised and/or new slope stability and geotechnical report, groundwater supply report, and tentative plan for the subdivision. The applicant's submitted site assessment and slope stability reports are over 10 years old and have been peer reviewed by 2 different consultant engineers. The peer reviews brought forth similar discrepancies and concerns regarding the technical merits of the reports. These comments were passed on to the applicant, and to date, no revised reports or comments from the applicant's engineers have been provided. As such, staff are providing an analysis of the proposed subdivision based on the submitted technical studies and the peer review comments provided by the county engineers for these reports. Further, at the time the report was prepared and submitted, a groundwater assessment had not been submitted. After the deadline for the report submission, the applicant then provided staff with a groundwater assessment report dated from 2007 and a tentative plan, which is handed out to MPC. However, because of the missed deadline and a 2-week turnaround required for technical reports, staff were unable to have the report peer reviewed by our consultant engineers for consideration. At this time, the proposed subdivision brings about a number of discrepancies with the statutory and guiding documents for the county as they relate to the natural environment, servicing, agriculture, and residential development. Staff also have concerns as they relate to the technical reports submitted to date as they relate to the land suitability of the proposed buildable area and intended future residential use of the space. The northwest quarter is identified on county mapping as an environmentally sensitive area, and the southwest quarter has a coulee which contains undevelopable steep slopes, a drainage course for the Bow River. Staff and the landowner have discussed the option and opportunities of designating the northwest portion of the quarter included in this proposed subdivision as an environmental reserve easement in the event approval is granted in order to protect and preserve the natural features within the proposed parcel. However, staff still have concerns about the inclusion of such hazardous and environmentally sensitive landscape features within a subdivision intended for future residential development. These features should be preserved in their entirety, and the proposed subdivision is not seen as conducive to meeting the goals of the county's environmental preservation efforts and for sustainable and smart residential development as per statutory and guiding documents. As previously mentioned, at the time the report was made, the applicant had not submitted a groundwater supply report. Although a report was later submitted due to time constraints, it was not peer-reviewed and was unable to be included in the report. Therefore, staff do not have sufficient information to determine the land suitability for the proposed buildable land area for residential development. Staff do have concerns of further residential development in the area as it relates to proposed parcel and its impacts on the local watershed and aquifer. As per the county's statutory and guiding documents, new residential development is encouraged in existing communities that are serviced or can provide opportunities for enhanced servicing. Although the parcel is not zoned as country residential, the application indicated residential use as part of the proposed use of the application. The tentative plan has identified a future buildable land area, and reports were submitted on the basis of residential development. Staff must consider the potential use for the parcel and how it correlates with the county's guiding documents. As such, staff have determined that the applicant's intents for future residential development on the site does not align with the county's documents, as it would promote development outside an established growth node and serviced area, further taking water resources away from the surrounding agricultural lands and operations, and putting a strain on county resources for development outside primarily serviced areas. Site assessment report was conducted and submitted, and our peer review found the report is outdated and requires revisions to current standards of practice for Alberta. Otherwise, the buildable land area, as determined in the original report, was deemed sufficient to support septic systems. The applicant submitted a slope stability report, which was previously written for the first application from 2006, which considered multiple country residential lots on the southwest quarter. Peer review is conducted by SEMA Plus, following a peer review by McElhaney. SEMA conducted that because the original report only considered the southwest quarter, a new geotechnical investigation and slope stability analysis should be undertaken to include an analysis of the northwest quarter, which is now part of the subdivision, and to determine minimum setbacks from slopes. Therefore, staff do not have sufficient technical information in order to determine the land suitability for the application, as not all the lands involved in the subdivision application were considered in the slope stability report. Although the proposed parcel is 39 acres and maintaining its agricultural general designation, the land availability and suitability for the parcel is reduced significantly due to the sensitive and hazardous land features and setback requirements as per the land use bylaw. As per the RGMS, MDP, and SSRP, agricultural diversity and strengthening of the agricultural economy is a critical and important consideration for the county and region. The proposed subdivision does not align with these documents, as the land remaining is minimal and would not provide valuable agricultural opportunities for the parcel due to the hazardous and sensitive areas that limit and result in limited usable land area for agricultural development and operations. Overall, staff have many concerns with the proposed subdivision, as it does not align with the core policies and objectives of the county's statutory and guiding documents. Further, the technical reports submitted are out of date, not in alignment with the current proposed subdivision and intended uses of the parcel, and do not contain sufficient information for staff and ultimately MPC to make an informed decision regarding the subdivision and potential future residential development on the parcel. Staff do not see the proposed subdivision and its intents as meeting the requirements of the county's MDP, LUB, RGMS, and SSRP as it relates to agriculture, servicing, sustainable and smart residential development, and the natural environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Tom.
I've been looking at this, and I don't have all the answers. I have a billion questions. But this subdivision that is shown here appears to have one buildable site. So therefore, is this not just a subdivision that there's a place to build a house that looks like, I mean, I think we have, if they wanted to build a house on the cliff, they'd have to have geophysical engineer take a look at it and make sure that it's not going to fall into the river. This thing's been going on for so long. I think it's just a subdivision. If they can get a laneway into that place and they can get somebody to buy that piece of property, and that person can build a house on there and put a septic tank in there and put water to it or bring water in, I think it's a subdivision. I mean, all this stuff that's, you know, the environmental concerns and all that kind of stuff. I'll be honest with you. I've been on the property, and there's one place to build on that property. The rest of it is riverfront, so like it's cliff. So I'm looking at it as a subdivision, and it's a 40-acre subdivision with a building site. And I'm not sure if that's wrong of me to look at it that way, but it's not a piece of property I would buy. But you know, it's all prairie. You're never going to be able to do anything with it. It's all native grass. So other than the house footprint being taken out of it, I think it's just a subdivision.
Is there any approaches on the piece, or how are they getting access to this proposed subdivision?
Through the chair, so we have, I'll just highlight it here. I'll zoom in if I can. So Township Road 215 goes through right here, and then it's undeveloped the rest of the length here. And so transportation would require the development of Township Road 215 to the parcel itself in order to provide proper access to this new parcel here. The remnant parcel with the existing dwelling here currently accesses it through somewhat of a panhandle that extends off of Township Road 215. So this one has access, but the Township Road would have to be developed to this new one here, and then an approach developed. And that would be the requirements from staff.
I know the land well too, and it's really definitely not agricultural. It won't be an impact on taking that out for sure. There's not much that's usable for farming. But I wanted to ask, is it under reserve now, the sensitive area?
Through the chair, so there is no environmental reserve or environmental reserve easement on any of that parcel, the southwest or the northwest. What we have on our mapping is what the province has identified in this entire area here, and then it extends outward as an environmentally sensitive area. So they basically identified it as something that should be considered when a municipality or a city or a town is looking to have development or subdivision on that parcel, and to take in consideration how to protect it. It's basically up to us to do the grunt work on protecting it. The province just identifies it as being a sensitive area. And so we do have policies within our land use bylaw, as well as the MDP, that relates to environmentally sensitive areas and development on them.
So can you put that as a condition, that that be done? Is that allowed?
Through the chair, so staff were in discussion with the landowner that the northwest area that was incorporated into the subdivision be taken as ERE, Environmental Reserve Easement, in the case that approval is granted by MPC. So that, yes, it can be a condition on there that it is granted.
Any other questions? Comments? Hearing any? A few comments I would accept, sure. Take the podium. Yes, you do.
My first request is, this is one of two plans that I would like to show, so I'm not quite sure how to operate this, but I appreciate the fact that we've seen this tentative plan in front of us now. And the second plan that I'd like to have, because it didn't ever come up in the conversation here, and that is the contour map that is very clear exactly why we're actually applying for this. And I emphasize the word boundary adjustment, because that's what this is. So if I can, I'd like to begin just by bringing it up. And just before I do that, if I can, I just have a couple of other additional things to say here and go through a response to what Odessa has just had taken a few minutes to do. The application is before you today was submitted to the Planning Department of Wheatland County November 23rd, 2009. There was a letter written to this MPC on June 29th of this year. And because I believe that letter was part of the documentation that was given to everybody here, I don't think I need to read it, but if there's any questions about it, I would certainly answer that. So as a result, I would just like to summarize that particular letter. It outlines the intended purpose of this application as a boundary adjustment that will solve, if approved, a direct physical access to our south parcel. It also indicates that the directive that was given to us, and in fact to Wheatland County as well, in 2012, that the road allowance that is between our two parcels was in fact closed, and a land consolidation was done, and that was completed in 2015. So the two parcels that we now have, instead of being separated, I'm not sure if I know how to pull that up there, if I can. Okay, thank you.
Do you want the tentative plan? Oh. Is that the one?
No, I just want the one that you had previously, because I was just going to start with the contour map, but I couldn't move it up and down.
You can just scroll it down like this.
Oh, okay.
That's just the
All
contour.
right, great.
And that's the tentative plan there, so you
Okay.
can go back and forth between those two.
Thank you. Still struggling here. Pardon? I can't get to the second page there, so if you can. This one? This one here? Oh, thank you. I am so sorry.
Load for a second.
That's great. That particular contour map that shows there, I'm just pointing out here right now, that is actually where the road allowance that was closed. And instead of our two parcels being separated by this road allowance, the parcels that we now have is actually adjoining each other. They're actually directly north and south. If I can overemphasize exactly what this map does show, because that's the reason why we have this application in front of you. The lines that you see there show elevations differences of 1 meter. And if you follow it over here, that's where the lines start to get exceedingly close. And what that does indicate to you is that it is not possible to drive on this government road allowance. That was certainly, I think, what Tom was trying to confirm there, and Donna, when they indicated that this particular plan is attempting to try and get onto that south parcel from over in here. Tentative plan boundary adjustment completed by A surveys was submitted to the planning department. You'll notice that it says it's a tentative plan boundary adjustment. Tom, I appreciate what you were saying about it being a subdivision. It really isn't. This is a boundary adjustment. We're not trying to combine any parcels any further than the two that we have right now. We're just trying to make this boundary adjustment according to what is shown here. So this dotted line that you see here is actually what the current boundary is between our two parcels. What we're proposing is that we bring in this boundary adjustment here, and now we would have this one parcel as our second parcel, and this would be our home parcel. And so what Odessa did talk about is that we would be able to get onto the second parcel right and access right here, because as you start to go further south here, you can't travel on that road allowance, which I just mentioned. The actual part of this parcel is access here, and you would actually, we would be able to build, or the new owners, I emphasize that, I will talk about that later, can build a driveway to where it shows this as being the buildable area. And it also, I would like to point out there that the actual setback from the severe gradient that clearly is there is the 30.48 meters, which is exactly what the building bylaws of Wheatland County are asking. I will bring that up a little bit later, but I would just like to point that out. I'd like to be able to point out to this commission a number of irregularities that are contained in the report that was prepared by the planning department on this application. That report that I have read was in the order of 20 pages long, in which some of that, it appears to have been read by Odessa, but some of the comments that she made were clearly not on that report because different than what I've read. And I just want to point that out. I'm not sure why that particular documentation was not shown on this overhead, because we could all go along with it. And there were some comments there that were made that was not in that report that I have read that was part of the posting. And I would like to emphasize that. So all I can do right now, because there's no chance that I could certainly comment on anything that was said by Odessa this morning. All I can comment on is the report that was, I understood, that was circulating to everybody here that I have had a chance to read. Therefore, that's what I'd like to do, is comment on that report that was available on the website of Wheatland County. The report does not acknowledge our submission of a boundary adjustment. Nowhere in this report can you find the words boundary adjustment. Yet boundary adjustment was referred to in the land use bylaws of Wheatland County at the time of this application as being a solution to create a direct physical access to a municipal road. The current bylaws refers to a boundary adjustment to create a different parcel, shape, or size. There was no specific form available that allowed for a boundary adjustment when this The report has referred to this application as being a consolidation and subdivision of the title lands. My wife and I met with the planning department on November 29th, 2017. At that time, it was suggested we consider dropping the current application in favor of two new ones. The first one would be an application of consolidating our two parcels that you see there. The second one, concurrently with the first, a subdivision of one parcel. We considered the options and decided to proceed with the original application, which is what we're bringing forth today. The report refers to two engineering reports that were given a peer review by the former consultant to the planning department, McElhaney Consulting Services. There are 5 main points to this review. I know everybody in this particular commission has had a chance to look at this peer review. If anybody wants to know what is in there, I actually have a copy of it, and I'd be glad to read the exact same points that I'm going to refer to right now. The first one is of the site assessment done by Almar Testing Services Limited. It only requests that the author of this engineering report stamp a letter of compliance. And that letter was dated on February the 26th, 2016. The second to the 5th point are involving the slope stability done by geoengineering. On June 22nd, 2018, via email to the planning department, the offer was made to remove this slope stability report from any further consideration with the acceptance of the slope setback as 30.48 meters as found in the land use bylaws of Wheatland County. This offer was made very clear with the tentative plan boundary adjustment that shows the buildable parcel area with this 30.48 meter setback. The report refers to a groundwater assessment supply report in order to determine the parcel's quality and quantity. Without any water management plan in place of Wheatland County, this application then should follow the Water Act and its accompanying ministerial regulations of Alberta. The Water Act clearly indicates that an engineering report is not required if a quarter section contains less than 6 lots. Proof of the quantity of water is therefore not required. In the past, the planning department acknowledged the receipt of a groundwater supply evaluation. The decision was made to not have this report peer reviewed. Emails were written to the planning department on June 22nd, June 26th, July 2nd, asking for the acknowledgement of this report. Only after an additional email written on July 5th, 2018, did the planning department respond that there was apparently no such report that they could find. This report, a groundwater supply evaluation of the Ward well within this southwest 28, 21, 26 west of the 4th, which is our home parcel, written by Groundwater Exploration and Research Limited, a copy of which was resubmitted to Wheatland County office on July 3rd. This report contains a 24-hour pump recovery and pump drawdown and recovery assessment of our home well in the quarter section that reflects this proposed boundary adjustment. It indicates that the quantity of water available in this quarter section is capable of supporting 3 lots. I would just like to add at this point, and it's just an added addendum here. My background is engineering. I am an engineer. I'm a former APEGA member. I understand what reports are all about, but I do understand that perhaps nobody in here would certainly understand that as well as I would. And so I can understand why the peer reviews are requested, but these reports that I'm referring to answer very, very simple questions. There's not a person in here that wouldn't understand what these reports are actually responding to as far as what their overall question is. The technology that they're acquiring these information may not be fully understood by everybody here, but their answers are exceedingly simple. If anybody wants to know what those questions are being asked, I would gladly be willing to answer that as part of the 2 reports that I've referred to at this point. The environmental reserve easement has been considered for some time. A call was placed to the environmental technician of Wheatland County in May. I received a phone call from the environmental technician on June 28th of this year. My wife and I were disappointed when the technician declined our offer of a site visit. We were instead referred to an external party. On Friday, July 13th, which was last Friday, we received proposed mapping of this environmental reserve easement by the planning department, with an attempt to revise it sent to me yesterday. There was not adequate time to have a meaningful conversation on what we would like to see as an environmental reserve. Agricultural usage of both our parcels have been used in the introduction of cattle and horses with arrangements with both of our neighbors. Fences have been constructed on both our parcels. We have no further plans if our boundary adjustment application is approved on our second parcel, which is the parcel that you see here that go down to the river. Maintain the land in its native prairie grass. 9 years later, our retirement plans are very different. We have no intentions of applying for any development permit. According to the guidelines of the Municipal Government Act, Section 663, municipal reserve is not required if the lot is in excess of 16 hectares and maintains agricultural usage. The report from the planning department suggested that this boundary adjustment has violated the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, the Regional Growth Management Study, and the Municipal Development Plan, with development that is proposed to be in river valleys, an environmentally significant area, and riparian habitat, as well as reducing agricultural usage with fragmentation. The tentative plan boundary adjustment that is before you right there clearly shows that the potential buildable parcel area of 2 point, and if you look at that, there's actually a little part there that does say 2.274. It does say that on that area of 2.274 acres. Is only shown on the upper level of the second parcel. This tentative plan boundary adjustment also indicates that it does not include any of the river valleys, environmentally sensitive areas, and riparian habitat. This application provides for the same number of parcels that my wife and I currently own, without any further fragmentation of existing agricultural lands. The technical review was made by the report requires that we address the following in a very shortened version. The access. We are prepared to build both the short extensions of Township Road 215, which is on the very top there. If I could run this arrow here, I would show, oh, look at that. There it is, right there. That would be a short extension from here to here, because that's as far as we would have to build the exit to extend this particular Township Road 215. And we, of course, would then have to build the approach to this complete second parcel here of 40 acres. Water services. A groundwater assessment report asking for the proof of the quantity of water is not required according to Section 23, subsection 3 of the Water Act, and Section 9, subsection 1 of the accompanying ministerial regulations. I know that's not something that's in front of everybody right now, but I know that part of it exceedingly well because I've had to use it on many things that I've done in my past. Sanitary servicing. The site assessment is currently asked for the letter of compliance provided by Almar Testing Services. Municipal reserve. The Municipal Government Act, Section 663, states that if the parcels are 16 hectares or greater and remains in agricultural usage, then no municipal reserve is required. Technical studies. The slope stability report is no longer required because the acceptance of the 30.48 meter setback which, by the way, it sounds like a strange number, but for anybody who'd like to know, that's exactly 100 feet. Any slope in excess of 15% grade. Planning department presented that this municipal planning commission has two options. Option 1 is to approve, option 2 is to refuse. Option 1 has indicated that Appendix A contains the proposed conditions for approval. As of the end of the day yesterday, no such appendix could be found. Option 2 provides reason for refusal, all of which I have been attempting to dispel in this presentation. I am presenting a third option. Have the planning department submit a new report that reflects the application that was submitted on November 23rd, 2009. This new report should contain the following. It should reflect the proposed boundary adjustment. It should acknowledge that a setback from a steep slope greater than 15% of 30.48 meters is acceptable. It should acknowledge no further review is required on the two engineering reports. Although not required, consider reviewing the groundwater supply report by Groundwater Exploration and Research as proof of the quantity of water for this quarter section. Further discussion should occur on the environmental reserve easement issue. We are willing to discuss this environmental reserve easement, and not only in our second parcel, which is the parcel that runs north-south, that's 40 acres, but we're also willing to include our home parcel. In conclusion, this commission has the opportunity to have a great deal of the river valley, which we are the present owners of, protected for generations to come. We have always been prepared to sit down and negotiate this proposed environmental reserve easement. We are prepared to have this environmental reserve easement as a document that would be registered on both our titles. Should I walk back? Whatever you'd like.
I'll ask first. Any questions? Thanks for coming up, Ward. Yeah, please sit.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns? Staff, you got something on this?
Through the chair, so I want to just bring up a couple clarifying points. With the groundwater supply report, it was brought into the office on July 5th, and I had previously told the applicant that because it did not meet the deadline for submission for reports, it wouldn't have been able to be included. Further, we have a contract with our engineers that a 2-week turnaround is expected for reports to be peer reviewed, and because of the late submission, having it turned around in time for this and then to also be included in the report itself would not have been possible. So we were unable to include that in there and get that peer review done in order for staff and MPC to have further information regarding it. With regards to the slope stability report, because it is dealing with the River Valley and because there are previous issues with subsidence and sloping within the Bow River Valley area, although although the 100-foot setback itself is indicated on the mapping here, regardless, a slope stability report helps to provide more information if that setback needs to be set further. In our land use bylaw, it states that typically a 100-foot setback is required unless a slope stability report or geotechnical report states a greater setback. So although the applicant has agreed to have the 100-foot setback, which does technically meet the land use bylaw, without the updated and revised slope stability and geotechnical report, we want to make sure we get clarification that there isn't a greater setback required potentially. So in any situation, anyone building or potentially suggesting that development is going to happen along steep slopes, we require that report to not only do our due diligence, but to avoid liability issues with regards to potential setback requirements for development. With regards to the application itself, the original application was reviewed by staff, and it is in our files, and it originally stated that the proposed use of the application in the area that is proposed for subdivision is for residents. Hence the reason why the Planning and Development Department has reviewed this application as such. Further to that, as I previously stated, all the reports submitted for this application referenced residential development. And so staff do have a responsibility to review that application based off of the intents of it. We suggested to the applicant that if they wanted to change their intents and purposes of the application to strictly subdivide out a parcel and only have it for agricultural uses, they could resubmit an application. However, we do have to take the application as it was submitted, and it did state residents as a potential use for this area. And therefore, those reports that were submitted concurrently with it were reviewed as such. With regards to municipal reserve, if approval is granted by the Municipal Planning Commission, municipal reserve is intended to be a condition because the intent of it is not strictly for agricultural purposes. As I previously mentioned, the reports and the application itself submitted referenced residential use as a potential future use. And there's a buildable area identified for future development. As per the MGA, it does state that if it's over 16 hectares or 39 acres in size and only for agricultural purposes only, then municipal reserve would not be required, or that's a discretion for MPC and the county. So at this time, based off of the merits of the application, staff would recommend municipal reserve, further because it has not also been taken on the property, and we see it as a terminal subdivision such that any future development, or sorry, any future subdivisions proposed would be very difficult for access and land suitability. So municipal reserve at this point would be the last option for Municipal Planning Commission to take for this property. The environmental reserve easement, we had talks with the landowner regarding environmental reserve and suggested that the northwest quarter be primarily looked at for ERE, mainly because it was identified as an environmentally sensitive area. I did submit a proposed map as per legal counsel to show the different areas identified on the tentative plan for the remnant, the proposed parcel, as well as the ERE. I did extend it out to the coulee that ran along the southwest quarter within the plan area, as identified just along here. Because it is a steep coulee, it's a drainage into the Bow River and would be considered a candidate for ERE. I then retracted that, and I have a revised map only showing this portion here of the subdivision, which is within the northwest quarter as it currently stands. As part of the ERE, which was discussed with the applicant over a number of emails and a meeting with them. So that's been maintained for mapping in our sense for clarity. With regards to the parcels here in talks with land titles, I know in my report I suggested that the decision would be for a subdivision and a consolidation. In talking with land titles, they stated that because you have two different titles on part of the application, you would have to do a consolidation plan. It's not part of the Municipal Planning Commission's responsibilities to make that decision. You're only deciding on the subdivision. Consolidation would then result in the entire length of that 40 acres being one title, and then the remnant parcel itself being a separate title. So at this time, you are only able to make that decision on subdivision. Consolidation, as previously mentioned in my statement when I first stood up, would be based on a final consolidation plan prepared by a surveyor once endorsement and approval by the county is granted. Other than that, I don't have anything else to add, but if there's any other clarifying questions regarding the application or the process, I'll be more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Donna?
So I feel that because of all the history, this application is very complicated and actually quite confusing. If this was to be refused, and the applicant can reapply for another permit and go from a different, so that you don't have all this history with it, right?
Through the chair, that's correct. So if this application were to refuse by MPC, they could potentially resubmit a new application within the same parcel. I can't recall at the top of my head if our land use bylaw states that they have to wait 6 months. I'd have to double check on that, as we do with the rezoning and redesignation. But I'm pretty sure, I'd have to double check on the land use bylaw again. But they could technically resubmit a new application for this parcel if it was refused. Yes.
Is it appealable too?
Through the chair, yes. So conditions are appealable, as well as the decision made by MPC, and that would not go to the SDAB. It would go to the Municipal Government Board for a decision because it's along the Bow River.
Any other questions?
We've never seen a boundary adjustment before since we've been on council. Is that something that we've done a lot of, or?
Through the chair, we've had a number of them. Typically, they're a lot smaller. They are in our fee schedule, we have a boundary adjustment fee because it doesn't require the same extent of work and planning requirements for a boundary adjustment. In this case, the boundary adjustment itself still requires a subdivision, and that's why it's being processed as a subdivision. Even with anything defined, even the smaller ones, you're still subdividing out a parcel and then it's consolidated into the rest of the adjacent parcel. There's always a subdivision involved, and that's why even though we call it a boundary adjustment, subdivision is still part of the process because of what's required and the steps necessary to get to that final parcel itself.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Amber.
Can you just confirm, so the only geotechnical information that we have is from 2006, and our peer review indicated that it was of a preliminary nature and that there were some information lacking, and we have had nothing since then. Is that accurate?
Through the chair, that's correct. So there was a slope stability report submitted, and that one was from about 10 years ago. I'm just gonna. So the site assessment report, which was for the PSDS septic, was from 2008, and then the preliminary slope stability assessment was from March 2006. So when we had our previous engineers, it was through McElhaney, and they did a peer review, and then we did a cursory review with our new engineers, and they basically stated that because the original slope stability report only addressed the southwest quarter because it was what was previously submitted for a previous application, it did not include analysis of the northwest quarter section, which is now included with the subdivision. So not only do we have missing information, but we've had no comments from the engineers to make comments on the peer review that we've had. We've had no communication with them, and so we have no idea really what their comments are with regards to that peer review. And so to date, we basically have insufficient information, as previously stated in my statement, to make a sufficient conclusion whether or not there will be any further issues, considering the northwest quarter is now included in this subdivision.
And in our land use bylaw, we have a 100-foot setback or something from top of slope. That doesn't mean we can't ask for more if the conditions are relevant to be on a site inspection. I think this is where it's going to. They didn't do it because they're back 100 feet and they don't have to because it says so, but really we can ask for more.
Through the chair.
Brief synopsis.
Yeah. Legal's nodding her head, so I'll take that cue as a yes. So within our land use bylaw, the wording specifically states that a 100-foot setback is required unless you have a geotechnical report that states something greater. And so then in that case, the greater number is then used for the setback. In this case, a slope stability report that was submitted stated that 20 meters would be the minimum distance. And so staff basically stated that the 100-foot would have to be maintained because it's not greater than the 100 feet that we had within our land use bylaw. So if MPC is worried about anything and has sufficient basis to request a further setback from the slope, then that is at your discretion. Typically, we use those geotechnical reports so that we have a strong basis. Hence why we are also requesting that, having an updated slope stability and geotechnical report will provide us with greater information and basis to that decision for not only staff, but also for MPC's consideration as well, that it's supported by something technical and signed by an engineer.
Right, so that could be a condition of subdivision that we get a new slopes, geotechnical survey done on that slope.
That's correct. So through the peer review that we had through SEMA, that was a recommendation that there was not only a revised site assessment so that it meets the 2015 standards of practice for Alberta, but also that a new slope stability report is provided, and then a new geotechnical analysis is done to include the entirety of that area proposed for subdivision in this application.
Okay, Tom?
We're struggling with this, but would not the onus be the geotechnical report be on when you're building the house on there? Because they're making a subdivision, they may not do anything with it. And as long as there's an area that you can build with, I mean, it sort of goes back to buyer beware, in my opinion, that if you're going to buy a piece of property and you're going to build a house on it, I'm thinking that you should probably but it's been pointed out to me that we may be assuming liability as the county because I know it's just so I'm just wondering if we're sort of getting the cart before the horse. I still maintain it's a standard sort of. And down the road when it gets sold, whoever buys that piece of property and decides to put a house on it is going to have to come for a DP. And at that point in time, and I think this is also when a DP is also when we should think about, that's when we should put a septic service on it so that the size of the house can be the size of the septic tank and maybe do the well at that point in time, put it all on the homeowners. I'm people looking down the road at their future plans are being asked to spend an awful lot of money for something that may never ever take care. So I'm just trying to figure out, this may not be the right format. We may have to discuss this, but I'm thinking that at the point where there's a development permit on the piece of property, then the geotechnical report should come in, then the septic report should come in, and then maybe the well water flow should come in.
Okay, Joanne?
Thank you, Mr. Reeve. I just wanted to highlight for MPC a few legal realities. First, under Section 654 of the Municipal Government Act, it is up to MPC as subdivision authority to ensure that this site, this land, is suitable for the proposed use. And I just pulled Mr. Ward's subdivision application, and agriculture was an option to check the box on proposed use, but he checked the box on residential. So that's the standard that you're making the assessment. Then secondly, also under 654, MPC as subdivision authority, you cannot approve an application unless certain criteria is met. And one of those things is that it has met the requirements of the subdivision development regulations. And importantly, when it comes to, well, what information do we need at subdivision stage versus development permit stage, Section 4 of the subdivision and development regulations provides, among other things, that as part of the subdivision application, the applicant must submit a number of plans, including effectively a geotechnical plan, because under Section 7 of the subdivision development regulation, the subdivision authority must take into consideration an entire host of factors that go to site suitability, which include susceptibility to erosion, to subsidence, etc. And so Section 4 of the subdivision and development regulations makes mandatory information be part of that subdivision application to allow MPC or subdivision authority to have the information you need to meet your statutory obligations when you are considering a subdivision application. So while I appreciate the comments with respect to, well, wouldn't we want to see this at development permit stage? Well, maybe you would, but the provincial legislature has said you need to see it at subdivision stage. So just that's what the regulations and the MGA provide.
So through the chair, I agree 100% with what Joanna said. Yeah, I'm a willing buyer, willing seller, but when I buy a parcel that's been subdivided, then I'm under the assumption that all these regulations and all these tests and studies have been done so that I have the confidence that I can build on that site. If that hasn't been done, I buy the parcel and I can't build on it, then what's the use of subdividing it? And if I'm going to subdivide it as the owner of the 2 parcels, what's my intent of subdivision? My intent of subdivision is not to keep it in my name. The intent of subdivision is to sell. And if you're selling it, it has to be to the new owner. Yeah, there's buyer beware, but it's still, there's certain conditions that have to be met so that when I buy that parcel, I can be guaranteed that if I meet the regulations, I can build on it. And if I can't, then I've bought a pig in a poke. And I don't think, I can't vote for this as long as the studies aren't in front of us to make sure that we have a piece of property that's actually buildable. So I agree with Joanne.
We'll see if council or MPC's done first. Any other comments? Andy's asked to speak. I'll allow that too. I'd just like to caution the board when public come in to speak, their vested interest for sure. But it wasn't open up for the public to be here either, so you have to take them as comments strictly as per se, right? Okay, go ahead, Andy.
Andrew Kumar with Ace Surveys. I'd like to touch on 3 quick points. I'll be quick. First of all, a geotechnical report was prepared in 2006, and it stated the setback of 20 meters, which Ross was fighting for the 20 meters. He extended that setback to 30 meters to adhere to the county's bylaws, even though it was greater than the report that was prepared for him. So the report said he can actually be closer to that bank than what we're showing. The map shown is showing the 100 feet, which is greater than the setback. So I think we've gone beyond the caution that the report told us to ensure that there's a large building site. And we can go even further back yet. The second point is that building parcel. We added that simply to say that if someone wanted to build on this in the future, they could. On a quarter section of land, I can show a building parcel that would show setbacks to well sites and stuff. We want to cover all our bases when we're making an application. This is simply saying if someone wanted to build on there, there's potential to build on there. We're not saying someone has to. They could buy it as ag land and leave it as ag land. We're just trying to cover our bases when we make an application. And the final one is the boundary adjustment that we keep talking about. I can absolutely guarantee that these titles will not be consolidated with land titles. It would be a single plan of survey that starts with 2 titles and ends with 2 titles. This would never, ever go to a single title at land titles. We are not losing a parcel. We are not creating a parcel. We're starting with 2 and we're ending with 2. And it would be a single plan that creates this if approved by council. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Amber.
Just a comment. I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that rivers are changing entities. They're not like stable necessarily, and there have been significant changes with the Bow River, particularly in this area since 2006. I have no problem with the subdivision, but I would like to see a current geotechnical analysis of it prior to considering that subdivision. That's
okay. Any other comments, questions?
I'll put a motion on the floor that we refuse it with the comments stated.
Okay. Ben's moved refusal with the comments stated on page 47. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's lost. We're still, we've defeated the motion that was made to refuse it. The application is for subdivision. Tom? Go ahead.
I think we have to have a third option. I think I want to see this brought back. I think I want to see it, but I don't think I can do that.
Well, I'm thinking before, if you want it brought back with the idea of approving it, I'm guessing, we would need to have an appendix A for conditions for approval, which is lacking here. Do we have a list of conditions? And then we can add or subtract to that list as it's presented.
So through the chair, in the event...
Bigger.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. I forget you guys are... I won't say anything. No. Don't worry, here I am. I have glasses on, so I really shouldn't say anything. So in the event that approval is granted by MPC, we did prepare through planning and development and with legal counsel a set of conditions for approval. First one is that a plan of subdivision is provided as per the MGA. Taxes, all outstanding property taxes, offsite levies, etc., are paid up front. This is again a standard. The first two are standard conditions as per the MGA. We also have cash in lieu for reserve lands. In this case, we have it for, let's see here, how have we written it? So a market value appraisal. So with the original application, there was no appraisal report submitted in order to determine the municipal reserve value. So a report would be required to be submitted by a professional appraiser, and then the applicant, the landowner would be required to pay Wheatland County 10% of the land through the appraisal report, cash in lieu, as per the MGA section 666. We would also request a deferred reserve caveat for the remnant parcel in the case that future subdivision is proposed and approved. Then we've also requested environmental reserve easement. So as per previous comments, we discussed the landowner that an environmental reserve easement would be considered and done for the northwest quarter involved in the subdivision, and that in the case that an environmental reserve easement cannot be agreed to between the landowner and the county, environmental reserve would instead be taken, and that would be at the discretion of MPC. The approved plans and studies. So this is just a summary of what would be required as per the conditions. Development agreement would be required in order to develop Township Road 215 to the proposed parcel in order to provide sufficient access. And that development agreement would go into details in the into the actual agreement itself, and securities will be provided in order to ensure that the county road is done to county standards, and that it would all be signed off by the County Public Works Department. Provision of technical reports. So as previously stated, groundwater supply report would be required to be submitted. An updated geotechnical report with any other subsequent reports required. An updated slope stability report with any subsequent reports, and that would be updated as per the comments by SEMA Plus on their peer review on June 28th. And then a revised site assessment report as per the comments of SEMA Plus regarding the updates to the 2015 standards of practice for the PSDS. A restrictive covenant, it was also placed on here for the geotechnical report as previously referenced. So the new one would be put on as a restrictive covenant, which means that anyone who takes over ownership of this particular parcel would be basically having this as a caveat and seeing that there is a technical report on here and they are fully aware of the requirements and or restrictions of that parcel based off of that report. Deferred servicing agreements, again, this is standard for subdivision applications, basically stating that in the event that future municipal servicing for water and septic comes through the area, the landowner would be required to connect to that servicing at their cost. Then an easement of agreement for construction and maintenance of any public works. Again, another standard agreement that we have on subdivision applications, such that at the time, if public works has to go in and repair any culverts along that Township Road 215, any damage or loss of land or crop or fencing is lost, then the county would then reimburse them. And then road acquisition agreement, again, another standard agreement that we put on subdivisions. In the event that we want to upgrade and widen the Township Road 215, we are able to have an agreement between the landowner to take 5 meters on either side of that road to widen it. In this case, it would just be on one side of his property, the other side would be on the adjacent landowner's property. So those are the conditions that we've written up. I'm also going to show a map that is schedule. Let's see if I can find it here. Nope. I'll bring that up. We have a Schedule A, which is part of the conditions, and it basically shows in reference to the remnant parcel in blue. So that's the one that has the existing homestead. The area in red is based off of the tentative plan that was submitted by the applicant, and then the proposed area for environmental reserve easement here, which was agreed upon between the owner and the county during conversations that the northwest would be considered for ERE in the event that approval is granted. So I've just highlighted that in green, and that would be the area registered for ERE. Thank you.
Any questions?
I do have a question about the access. I'm just curious, this is obviously prior to this subdivision, but how did we allow the single access for both both residential houses on there? Because you'd have one.
There's a long history to that. Their Township Road 215 extends from another municipal road and comes all the way down, and it was, I believe, in 1996 when there was an agreement to provide access through that. It currently isn't to county standards. However, Transportation Infrastructure stated that at this time, in order to provide access, they would just have to be extending the road down to the proposed parcel. The current access that they have, as I mentioned previously, is kind of through a panhandle when this remnant parcel here was subdivided out. As per the plan, let's see here, yeah. So Plan 1513309, it was subdivided out to allow for continued access across the top and then to also allow access to that remnant parcel as part of the southwest. So it's all previous subdivisions that had happened with previous agreements between the council or MPC at that time. So I can't really speak to why that happened, but it is as it currently is right now. And what we're going to do is work with what we have and just request that the Township Road 215 be extended to provide legal physical access to this new proposed parcel. Easements are basically within our land use bylaw not recommended to prevent legal issues. We would prefer to see the physical legal as per the regulations from the provincial government. But yeah, other than that, it's just old history, unfortunately, that allowed the subdivisions to happen and the access to be as it is today.
Okay, any other questions? I'll put them conditions back on, please. One more time, okay, Loris?
Yes, I'm sure these conditions that you've just asked to have put up here now is the same reason that I'm going to ask. Nobody's had the opportunity to read these conditions until just now. Why were they not put on the report that was made available to myself and as an owner and to everybody here? So if we're sitting down here talking about it right now, why was it not available previously?
I can just say that they're there now, and that's what the board has to look at. So,
Okay.
Up to the board right now. Go ahead, Tom.
I move that the board accept option number 1 with the conditions noted in Appendix A.
Just a question. I don't believe it's our job to tell somebody what to do on their land. And I feel if they want to put land into environmental reserve, they can. I don't think it should be a condition listed. I don't think it's mandatory, in my opinion.
Through the chair, so we brought this up to the landowner during discussions, I believe, when I took over the file last August, and we suggested it because it's an environmentally sensitive area, and an ERE is voluntary. The whole point of the ERE is that it's an agreement between the landowner and the county. We do not take ownership of that land, as would be an environmental reserve. That way, with the environmental reserve, we can decide which land we want to take. In this instance, discussions were put forward for the Northwest, specifically because it was identified as an ESA, and we recognized that as a provincially recognized area that was sensitive in nature along the Bow River. And so in all our discussions, it was the Northwest Quarter that was in discussion. And so that was reflected in the conditions because there was no objection to it. They were referred to outside parties as well for consideration. However, if the landowner is not in agreement to the ERE, MPC has the discretion to remove it. They also have the discretion to take ER and determine which lands that they wanted to put in for ER, or completely scrap ER and ERE and not take it at all, and allow the landowner to do it through a potentially conservation reserve easement, which is the purchasing of land from a third party who would basically be out there to protect it and preserve it. However, to date, all I've had conversations with has been for ERE. No comments have been made with regards to removing that as a potential for the property. Again, at the end of the day, MPC has that discretion to decide.
Through the chair, the applicant as well as anybody else has the option to appeal these conditions too. So if they don't like them, they can go through that process.
So Tom has moved. Appendix A. Any questions? Concerns? All in favor? Opposed? Is carried. We'll have a short break.
Yeah, if you are caught, I'm going to go watch, because there was that
And we'll go to subdivision file SD 2018-10.
All right, so I have a proposed subdivision, SD 2018-010. It's to subdivide 161.9 acre parcel from the titled land. It's adjacent to Range Road 253 and approximately 5.5 kilometers southwest of the town of Strathmore. Staff is recommending that MPC choose option 1 to approve subdivision application SD 2018-010 with the conditions noted in Appendix A of the planning report. So I'm just going to pull up the image here of the proposed area. So again, for location, it's just southeast of town of Strathmore. So the quarter itself here is primarily agriculture in nature. It's currently zoned AG and will maintain its designation as such. The proposed parcel size do not require municipal reserve to be taken because they are over the regulated amount as per the MGA. No future development has been proposed within the parcels being created, and there is panhandle access to the top 61.9, and then the remnant parcel would then be required to have access as well. Through staff analysis of the application, the relevant policy, we looked at the SSRP, the RGMS, and the MDP and land use bylaw. Meets the regulations and objectives for agricultural lands and diversifying the agricultural economy through the continued use and maintenance of the large tracts of agricultural land through the SSRP. The RGMS, it also meets the requirements for agriculture and reduces conversion of agricultural lands, seeing as it maintains its size and intended use. Further, again, because it does not propose development on the site, it would not be impacting existing water bodies and wetlands on the proposed and remnant parcel. The larger water body here is protected through Ducks Unlimited, and so in this case, Alberta Environment did not provide any comments with regards to setbacks or maintenance of these particular wetlands. Through the MDP, again, it meets the agricultural natural areas section as it's maintaining the designation and use of agricultural land and provides for sufficient land area for future use and operation of agriculture. And because there is no development and the proposed subdivision is not directly crossing over any of the water bodies, it also maintains the natural areas section as per the MDP. And through the land use bylaw, because it's maintaining its agricultural general zoning, the lands can continue to be used as such unless a further subdivision or rezoning occurs. So I'm going to just go down to the circulation. So as noted in my report, comments were, one comment was received basically just stating that they weren't in support of future development that could happen on the property. However, as I mentioned to this particular person, there was no proposed development. However, staff do recognize that with a subdivision, especially at this size, there is always an opportunity for a development permit to come in for residents. However, until that comes in, and because it's not part of the application itself, staff have no concerns but do recognize the potential for future residences on the parcel there and in the quarter. However, it does not change our recommendation for approval. Alberta Health Services had their standard comments, and no other comments were received from external agencies during the circulation process. I am going to go up to the Appendix A for conditions. The standard 3 agreements for deferred services, an agreement for easement of construction and maintenance of public works, and road acquisition are placed on this parcel. Site visit was done to the approach that is proposed for these, for the proposed and for the remnant, and Public Works required that it be widened to accommodate a joint access. Therefore, it has been conditioned that it's widened and then inspected and approved by Public Works. Otherwise, the existing approaches will also have to be inspected and approved by Public Works to ensure that they are sufficient. Reserves are also going to be taken for the remnant parcel. This proposed subdivision will create the 5th on the quarter. So any further ones will be required as per the reserves for the remnant to take municipal reserve. And as previously stated, because of the size of the parcels and the intended use, staff have deemed it not necessary to take municipal reserve for the proposed. That's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Ben?
Just for information, you go back to the area plan, please. Map. That one. Is there an issue, are those buildings in here? Are we setting up an issue with the setback? I was wondering why, I know because of the trees, but if you run it straight up here, then you're not, that looks like there's buildings right there against the.
Through the chair, I have not looked at the adjacent parcels. These are all separate. So we've got 1, 2, and 3 for this particular structure. It's hard to tell from here, but because it's not on these, within these property boundaries, it's within their own. That would be something for planning staff to look at separately. It wouldn't be consideration for this parcel because it technically isn't within the property boundaries that are being considered for subdivision.
So could there be a condition put on there that the boundary not affect any setbacks to adjoining properties?
If that were the case, you would be going into someone else's property. So the property line that's here, that's part of an existing parcel right here. So then you would be conditioning for, yeah, so it's a completely, it's an existing, that's correct. So it's an existing property line. The only one that's being created is along the middle here
Okay.
The rest of them are established from previous subdivisions.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question that we've talked about multiple times, is ag fragmentation, and we still really don't have any idea where that is or how to go about that issue. And I just laugh. Sometimes it's on here, sometimes it's not. And to me, this is ag fragmentation. And I mean, the way I look at it, so you've got a parcel that's 60 acres and then another one that's 80. And on an 80-acre parcel, you can have 2 dwellings without a permit, correct? Like 2 homes without subdivision. So, I mean, worst comes to worst, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses on a quarter section without any pipe services, because to actually hit pipe services, you would need 7 houses on there in this case. So, I mean, that's just, yeah, or we could throw some garden suites on there and have 12. We could have a whole little town here and not have any pipe services. And that's the issue I have. I mean, I think we are setting ourselves up for an interesting time in the next few years if they happen to put 2 dwellings on that 80 acres, subdivide it out, and then what can you do? So that's I'm a little leery in this.
I'm of the opinion that if there's 5 on a quarter, we can't put the 6th one on. So that is the way I interpret that law. So that, is it not that way, that if it's 5 on a quarter, then we have to change that law? Yeah. Okay.
Not a law.
Through the chair, so within our municipal development plan, it states that as soon as you subdivide out 6 or more parcels within a quarter section, an area structure plan is required to be submitted, and then you are also required to connect to municipal servicing and water. So with that being said, because this proposed subdivision would create that 5th parcel, any subsequent subdivisions would be then required to connect and to provide that area structure plan. And in the report, we do recognize it is agricultural fragmentation, but again, because we don't have enough guidance from council with regards to what we consider that limit, planning staff basically see this as you've maintained 2, but it is totally justifiable with your comments that it is legitimately agricultural fragmentation and there is potential for development. So at this point, staff just made the decision that, or made the recommendation based off of the fact that agricultural use is still maintained. The parcels are large enough to maintain that use. However, with the comments that we received from the adjacent landowner, that does bring to point your concerns as well.
Okay.
I'm going to ask Councillor Wilson. That is pasture, that'll always, there's nothing you can do with that. So does a cow not eat around a house? I don't know how much effect does a cow put onto a pasture land. It is still going to be agricultural, right? And the fragmentation question is a great question. And I don't think there is an answer, but we will struggle with it.
I'm thinking you're the owner back there? Sure, please make a comment.
Yeah, my name is Jens Lehman. Claire and I, we're the owners of the property. And just want to say about the north parcel of it, the 61.9 acres, is basically wetlands. The far north part of it, I have never been able to get over with a vehicle to that parcel of it. So it is, cows can get over, they get mud up to here to get to it. So out of the whole parcel, the 61 acres, there's about 10 to 15 acres that you can cultivate. The rest is native land. Okay. And that's one reason why we put the borderline where we did.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, to take the egg aspect out of it then, I mean, you're still having 7 houses on a quarter section with no... I understand that, and I'm not worried about the current owners at all. I'm just, worst comes to worst, you're gonna have 7 houses on a quarter section without any pipe services. That doesn't make it right. Tom.
Depends on the future of what the council decides on the MDP too, so. Okay, any other questions? Wishes?
I move that the MPC approve option 1 with the conditions that are noted in Appendix A.
Okay. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks for coming in. And files SD 2018-11.
All right, so subdivision SD 2018-011 proposes to subdivide one 5-acre parcel from the titled land. It's adjacent to Township Road 280 and approximately 15.5 kilometers northwest of the village of Rockyford. Recommendation from staff is that MPC choose option 1 to approve subdivision application SD 2018-011 with the conditions noted in Appendix A of the planning report. All right, so I'm going to scroll down. Oh, there we go. I'm going to go into the imagery here so you can have some context. So it's just south of Kneehill County here and off of Highway 21. I'm going to zoom in. So the area in yellow is the proposed area as per the tentative plan. So the intent is to separate out the existing homestead from the proposed parcel, which is currently cultivated. There's an existing dwelling, farm building, and accessory structures within the proposed area for subdivision. The proposed area was previously granted redesignation to country residential by council on April 3rd, 2018. So as can be seen, I'm just going to scroll down to the next one here. We have the farm building, which is existing. We have the dwelling as well, which is connected through the driveway here that acts as a panhandle. The applicants have stated that the structures and the silos here are not included because they're still being used by the property that's going to be the remnant, and so they wanted to maintain that as part of the remnant parcel, but not included within here as the primary intended use is for residents. So as per the policy and legislation of the county, the SSRP for South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, we reviewed it through the strategic plan and implementation plan for agriculture and land use. The proposed does not remove or fragment cultivated land. The existing homestead and yard site is separated through vegetative buffers and an established yard site through the grassed area and the driveway. Through the RGMS, the existing residential development is on cultivated quarter, but does not remove any cultivated or at least minimal cultivated land through the proposed subdivision. Through the MDP, policies for agriculture and residential development were reviewed and deemed to be sufficient when compared with the proposed subdivision. And through the land use bylaw, seeing as it was previously redesignated to country residential to support country residential and rural residential uses, the existing structures and use of the parcel itself fits within the intents and purposes of the land of section 9.3 for country residential. It was also confirmed that the septic and water well on the site is also contained within the property boundary, seeing as it's an existing development and residential use. Circulation was done to those within 1.5 kilometers of the proposed area, and nothing came back. Same with the circulation to agencies. No major concerns came up through that circulation. With regards for staff's recommendation for approval, the following conditions were put together for consideration of MPC. Again, the 3 agreements for deferred services, easement of construction and maintenance, and road acquisition are standard and are included as part of the application's approval. The approaches themselves, unfortunately, we were unable to do a site visit to review them. However, they will be required for the existing and remnant to be built to county standards and approved by Public Works. Reserves for the remnant are also going to be put on title for collecting municipal reserve on future subdivisions. As it is the first parcel out, municipal reserve is not required. With that being said, a final plan of survey and taxes to be paid up to date are also required as per standard procedure through the Municipal Government Act for a subdivision. That's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Tom?
How are they going to get to those, on the area plan, how do you get to those 3 granaries and that shed in the back? Yeah, but they're not going to. Okay.
Each parcel needs an approach for sure.
So through the chair, as previously mentioned, the applicant stated the reason for not including those particular structures is because it's still being used as part of the cultivated quarter. And so they didn't need it as part of this proposed subdivision. They only wanted to include the direct area that was used for residential purposes. And as MPC was explaining there, the remnant parcel is required to build a new approach off of the municipal road allowance, and that will be inspected and approved by County Works if it's deemed sufficient. And so then that would allow access to those structures there. It just depends on where they decide to put that remnant approach, and if and it should allow access to that remnant and therefore access to those structures there.
Okay, any other questions?
I have no questions. If there's no questions, I will put the motion on the floor that we go with staff's recommendation and choose option 1 to approve subdivision application SD 2018-011 with the conditions noted in Appendix A of planning report.
Okay, any questions or concerns? All in favor? Carried. Thanks for coming in and waiting. Okay. Other planning matters. Oasis Campground.
The only reason I'm bringing that up on reading through the decision on it, we're taking 125% on the that's one of the on the construction of aspects on it. Do we take 125% on the pavement that they're going to have to do? Like, is that on the whole thing? So I'm hoping that we're looking at like a $3 million holdback on like somewhere in there. Like,
yeah, I don't know what the amount is, Councillor Eichert, but it's 125% is our policy on any improvements.
And the paved road, the pavement is included in that. Mm-hmm. The work that's going to be done on the Transcant or the 901 highway is going to be done on that.
On 22X, yeah.
901. Oh, it says 901 on my book. Yeah, let's be right.
901.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's sort of. I mean, I hate losing, and I'm okay with developers until we get screwed around, and I think we got screwed around on this one. So, I don't care. I don't care. This is, as I've stated, when this thing came to us 2 months ago, I was under the assumption there were 65 campsites in there. And then I find out that there's 180 plus 150 plus, they're going to build 65 more for 330. So this goes against everything. This is just wrong. I don't care if I am being recorded. This is not the right way to do business. So at some point in time, we have to hold this guy's feet to the fire. So that's it, my rant.
Okay.
I think I could have put it in an email. That wasn't public. I want somebody to read this.
Okay. Any other questions? Joanne, you come just to listen, or you want to speak to us after the meeting?
I had initially been requested to come for the Ward subdivision in case there were questions. And then we weren't entirely clear what MPC wanted to discuss with respect to Prairie Oasis, so I was asked to just
Okay,
hang out until that discussion was finished.
okay, thank you. Nothing else? We can
Excuse me,
adjourn.
excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Ben's moved. Oh,
We have actually asked Mr. Mike Zier just to step in because I do believe he has a little bit of an update on perhaps some of the things you're actually talking about. So he will be here momentarily.
who's that? I missed the first part. Oh, Mike. Is he coming back?
Owned by Danny Thiessen?
If he ain't the biggest slumlord in the area, he's certainly worth it.
I'm going to turn your mic on there, Tom.
Hi.
Words of wisdom.
I think the question, Mike doesn't know what he's here for.
I missed
So I think the
this, I
question
missed
was to do with the amount for the
Oh, yeah,
paving.
yeah, just, the question is the amount of the whole, we're talking about Oasis Grove.
Yep.
The 125% or, on whatever you, holdback you call it.
Securities.
Securities.
Yep.
Now, is that, my question was, does that include all the paving and the 901 addition, whatever they have to do to make that approach on 901 safe and all that kind of stuff? Does that include that number? So do we have an idea what the whole number is? Like, is it like $3 million or something like that? Like,
Right. So yeah, you're correct that as part of the development agreement, that every developer enters into to build our roads or build on our roads. We ask for, starting off with the design, we get them to do an engineered design. Once we approve that, we ask them to do a construction cost estimate, and that is basically a unit rate, line by line of what they're doing, just like we would for any contract. We have them submit that, and we get it peer reviewed to make sure that the numbers are appropriate and in line with today's construction estimates. From that, then we ask for 125% value of that cost estimate put in as a letter of credit or cash, but normally this comes as letter of credit, and make sure that we have that. It's an irrevocable letter of credit, which basically means that they have the monies in place. The banks have committed to supplying us with that money if, for some reason, the developer steps back and walks away. So we can finish the job up to what they've proposed as part of that development agreement. So as far as this specific instance, I'm actually meeting with them this afternoon, so I haven't even discussed road upgrades with them yet. So we haven't gone past to I've sent them our standards, but we haven't discussed what level we're building this road at. But as far as the estimates, it would be based on engineered design. Well, and as far as our county standards, we do have different levels depending on what it's servicing. So we go right down from double seal coat for a small country residential right up to 10-meter wide paved industrial standard. So we're going to look back at the traffic counts, the estimated. TIA gives traffic estimates, but it doesn't really speak to the level of development in the area or to existing oil field, that sort of thing. So we got to go a little more detail on that and determine, I'm thinking it's going to be a paved standard. 9-meter top is kind of what I'm thinking right now. To go above and beyond that is excessive because it's not in our standard to begin with, because the TIA wouldn't speak to requiring that. So we might have a challenge asking for more than what's in our standards right now. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Now we can adjourn. No?
We're going to talk about, you're going to update about, that's not a.
No. That's after we adjourn, right?
Just thinking he's here anyway.
Yeah. Scott's moved to adjourn. All in favor? Carried. Now for some